So yesterday was, of course, Nintendo's big day with the Nintendo Switch 2 unveiling. We saw system features, games, all sorts of fun stuff. Of course, not everyone is going to like every single thing, but overall, I thoroughly enjoyed this presentation. I was very pleased with the way that the games look, how the games will perform in terms of what the Switch 2 is capable of, and I think the additional system features are very nice. Yes, the system is a bit pricey at $449 or $499 with Mario Kart World attached to it, but I feel like with the specs that you're getting, especially when you compare it to something like the handheld mini PCs that are on the marketplace, I think the system is right in line with what it should cost, maybe even a bit on the lower end of the spectrum, especially when you consider comparing it to something like a ROG Ally X or something like that, which could cost nearly double the price of a Switch 2. Of course, though, there was lots of conversation that we ended up talking about in another video yesterday on the channel around the price of Mario Kart World. Lots of misinformation was floating around because it's the internet, but I don't think Nintendo really understood the size and scope of people that were going to have a problem with Mario Kart World being an $80 game until the Treehouse presentation today. Nintendo did an in-depth look at games such as the aforementioned Mario Kart World, Metroid Prime 4, Donkey Kong Bonanza, and honestly, these games all look great. These games all look very advanced. They all have very impressive visuals and effects going on and lighting effects going on. It's pure eye candy to see this, especially coming to us from Nintendo. And you would think that that's what the chat would be talking about in the YouTube live chat for the Treehouse presentation. Everyone would be talking about, oh, these games look so cool. These games look so awesome. But no. Nobody's talking about that. Instead, they're talking about the price of Nintendo Switch 2 games on a case-by-case basis and Nintendo Switch 1 upgraded versions on the Nintendo Switch 2 as well, because there's lots of confusion. There's lots of commotion about this. Prices seem to be all over the place. So I kind of want to talk about what is going on with this, clear up some misconceptions that are floating around out there as well, and try to come to some sort of, understanding of why this is happening. So Mario Kart World was reported as being $80 digital, $90 physical. And while in some regions that is the case, if you live in the United States, that is not the case. And, shout outs to other countries out there and stuff like that. I like you guys. You guys are cool. I live in the United States, so I'm only focusing on prices here, prices that will impact me. So no, there is no $90 physical edition of the game. The digital cost of the game is $80 and the physical cost of the game is $80. People also like to point to tariffs potentially raising the price of these games. And once again, I think that's a false equivalency. I'm not an economic expert, and I do understand that tariffs are rapidly changing in the United States. But when you see Donkey Kong Bonanza as a $70 game, but Mario Kart World is an $80 game, to me, that doesn't scream tariff. To me, that screams calculated decision. This is a business decision by Nintendo to increase the price of the game. And I'm sure they're not going to say why all of a sudden a game is jumping up to $80, but this doesn't scream, an economic situation to me. If anything, you would see it more so on the hardware side of things. And when you look at the hardware, like I said earlier, I think it's competitively priced. Of course, if you are in Japan, it's actually a lot cheaper to buy a region-locked Japanese system. I kind of see that as a loyalty thing more so than anything else, though, because once again, other regions that aren't going through tariff changes right now aren't seeing a dramatic difference in the price comparative to other systems that are on the marketplace and other games that are on the marketplace. I really think this is just a business decision by Nintendo, and people are unhappy about it. People are genuinely upset about this. And I can't say that they're necessarily wrong. And I think there's a myriad of reasons that people are upset about this. And really, the main one to me has to be what Nintendo's vision has always kind of been. They've always been, a cheaper alternative to other platforms. And you could compare, the N64, PS1, Sega Saturn era and say, well, look, this is when Nintendo games were at their highest and you could buy games on the PlayStation 1 or the Sega Saturn for cheaper. And you would be 100% correct, but that was a different time. It was because of manufacturing costs to actually produce those cartridges. It's kind of a false equivalency in my opinion. And then when you compare the price of the N64 to something like the Sega Saturn, to something like the PlayStation 1, you got an extended value in buying the system at a lower price point. Of course, the video game industry was a much smaller industry at that time. You know, a game that sold 5 million was considered to be absolutely mind-blowing, and now you can sell 5 million and it's considered a flop. So you know, it kind of goes back on what Nintendo's main priority has been ever since they entered into like the GameCube era. You know, cheaper games, cheaper systems, you know, being the value budgeted customer option for people. And to see them being the one to take the leap to an $80 standard edition of a game is very jarring. You know, I think a lot of people are starting to make equivalencies to, you know, the 3DS with this, where when the 3DS came out, prices were high on things, and Nintendo was forced to kind of pivot, do the ambassadors program with this, and so on and so forth to kind of recorrect history. And I mean, that's a thing to consider as well. But it's just weird to me to see how all over the place the prices of things already are. You know, Mario Kart World is a game that is $80. But Donkey Kong Country or Donkey Kong Bonanza is a $70 game. And these are both first-party games. And then you have a game such as Street Fighter 6 that's a $60 game. And yes, that is a third-party game, but still, like, why is that $60? And then you have a game like Cyberpunk 2077, which is $70. But Cyberpunk is all on the 64 gigabyte cartridge. So obviously that's going to cost a little bit more to manufacture than versus something like Street Fighter, which is $60, but you have to download most of the game onto the system because the card is just sort of the digital card. The mixed messaging for a lot of this stuff, I think, is going to be a little bit problematic. You and I understand it. You know, you're an educated person. You watch this channel, and I thank you for that, because you watching is going to help me afford all this crap. But you watch this channel, so you kind of understand. The general consumer, I don't know how they're going to, you know, because we haven't even really hit the general consumer. The people that are talking and writing articles and talking about this in YouTube chats and on social media, they're not really the general consumer. The general consumer is the person that doesn't really use social media, isn't on the internet all the time, isn't watching YouTube all the time, is the parent or the person that's going to walk into a store, see a new Nintendo system and see an $80 game and be like, what the hell is that? When did games become $80? Now, of course, you could go into the whole inflation situation and stuff. Well, games should cost more, and people will seem to die on that hill. I think that's a conversation for another day, because once again, it's a false equivalency, you know, and I just don't see it because of the size and scope of the video game industry, the ways that distribution has changed as well, the amount of copies games sell versus how they would sell back then, which I already mentioned with a game, you know, selling 5 million copies. But, you know, it's a hard pill to swallow. And initially, you know, the Switch 2 is going to sell out. The games are going to sell out. It's going to go like hotcakes. I'm more interested in 6 months from the release of the system. You know, is that game still going to be $80 as Mario Kart World? And then you have the whole thing with the upgrade games. That's a whole nother confusing thing in and of itself, because if you have the expansion pack, you get some upgraded games for free that are just visual upgrades. But if it adds story content, like they're selling Kirby the Forgotten Land for $80 because of the fact that the base game is $60 on the Nintendo Switch, and they're charging $20 for the upgrade that includes additional story content. I don't know, man. I don't know. You know, it seems very weird to me. It seems very weird to me, and I guess it's an option. You know, you could pick up a used copy of Kirby and the Forgotten Land and then just pay the $20 upgrade that has the additional content, and then you're kind of good to go. But it seems a little convoluted. It seems a little bit confusing, especially for the average customer who isn't really following all this stuff, you know, isn't really in tune with the internet and video games and online culture. And I'm very interested to see how this pans out. You know, I'm not going to tell you to buy a game or buy a system if you don't want to buy it. Obviously, I'm going to buy it because of my job. And I'm going to buy all the games because of my job, because I need to show you guys how the games look, how the games perform. And luckily, with your views, you have put me in a position to be able to comfortably be able to afford all of this stuff. But, you know, I feel like my role is going to become even bigger because with the increased prices of these games, like, you're going to want to know, is this game worth the price? And I guess I'm going to have to be the person to let you guys know. So let me know in the comment section down below. What do you think about this? You know, what do you think about the reaction from people? Do you think it's justified? Because I 100% do. You know, $70 games, that's one thing. $80 games, you're getting a little crazy with this, Nintendo. A little bit greedy. A little bit greedy. And as always, guys, thank you for checking out this video. Be sure to check out the video from earlier today talking about pre-order bonuses. Be sure to check out the other video from yesterday. There's 2 videos from yesterday. I am cranking these out like knuckle children because there is stuff to talk about, and I need to keep you guys informed. Hit subscribe if you're new, and as always, I'll catch you guys on the next video. Later.